Now, what's interesting is cyberspace, to me, is the world's largest ungoverned space, right? And if you think about war zones are these sort of unstable environments, and in these unstable environments, you have warlords and smugglers and criminals and terrorists who make use of the chaos and the anarchy to essentially ship their own products. And it's the same thing online. So I mentioned a bunch of the sort of powerful countries that sort of wield a indigenous cyber capacity, but most countries around the world will not have the cyber capabilities to be able to defend themselves or be able to attack. And so what happens? What happens is they begin tapping into an entire ecosystem, underground ecosystem of cyber mercenaries and criminals. So if you're a smaller government and you lack the capability, you'll just go buy it. And by the way, this is also true for terrorist organizations. So, with ISIS, there's lots of talk about how ISIS is this tech-savvy organization. I would posit that ISIS is not a tech-savvy organization. ISIS uses technology a lot. They're very good at marketing and propaganda, but they possess no capability to conduct a cyber attack that is able to wreak any kind of havoc on a society. But the successor to ISIS is a different story. They'll just go out and they'll buy the capability. The other thing that gets very interesting is how we as a country begin thinking about military assistance, right? So we're used to a world in which, we need to send a bunch of helicopters to Mexico, we need to send a bunch of fighter jets to Pakistan, and the hope is that it helps them keep their particular situation stable. But we really get no direct ROI back from that. As it pertains to a country's cybersecurity, the entire thing is about large annotated data sets that you can train the machine to build a compelling AI to defend your country. So if you're the United States, think about how military assistance looks like in this context. You give a country the software to defend itself, that country gets attacked a lot, and in exchange you get their training data. So by virtue of providing software for protection to our allies and partners, we're helping our allies and partners, but we're also making ourselves more secure every time they get attacked. So you imagine just covering all of Eastern Europe. Every time Eastern Europe gets attacked, there's a direct ROI in terms of our own defense networks in the United States getting better. It's, in some respects, an exciting way to think about military assistance. In order for countries to go to war, they typically need some sort of political momentum behind them. So let's say Hamas wanted to do another intifada, right? Historically, the way that they've been able to garner enough support for an intifada has been there's been tanks coming into Gaza or enough missiles going in and so forth. Something had to physically happen. In this era, maybe they would just try to do a blitzkrieg of their population of fake news and convince the population that something happened that didn't. Or let's say Russia wants to march into Moldova and grab a couple towns, or Eastern Ukraine and grab a couple towns. They might make a case. So in the physical world, the U.S. and China, they're sort of we trade with each other. We're sort of at worst sort of frenemies, at best partners in some respects. But if you look at the digital dynamic between the two countries, we're basically at war. Right? It's more kinetic and warlike than the physical one between the United States and North Korea. So the problem I have is if you keep attacking each other in the digital domain and then pretend things are normal in the physical domain, at what point do things get so nasty in terms of this nefarious cyber activity that it warrants a physical response? And we're afraid to really, we haven't really seen that threshold yet, and we don't know. And if we don't start defining it now, we're going to ultimately find ourselves in this terrible digital guns of August moment where we find ourselves at war with a country where they don't want to be at war and we don't want to be at war. Or imagine a Dr. Strangelove scenario where we get, there's some sort of horrific cyber attack on our electrical grid, it's a catastrophe, and because of attribution challenges, the perpetrating country made it look like it was another country, and we end up going to war with the wrong adversary.